If you want to learn how to get published in a high-impact peer-reviewed journal such as Nature and Science without graduating from high school, stay with me. Hi and welcome to the Uncon School at howtobecomeaprofessor.com, the web show to learn from unconventional academics and experts. My name is Stefan and I'm your host. Today we're going to learn how Zack Simpson, a high school dropout, managed to publish his research in Science and Nature. Zack is a software engineer, an artist, a scientist and entrepreneur. A high school dropout at 17, he became a top video game designer and at 23 was named Director of Technology at the video game company Origin Electronic Arts. He later started making interactive art, and his artwork is now in permanent installations in more than 40 museums around the world. In 2003, he began working with the Center for Systems in Synthetic Biology at the University of Texas at Austin, where he works on projects ranging from chemical kinetics to synthetic biology. His entrepreneurial efforts include 2 art-based companies and a web-based bioinformatics company. Zack, thank you very much for joining us. Obviously, you're wearing many different hats. So the very first question I'd like to ask you is, how have you been able to become a successful artist, a successful scientist, and a successful entrepreneur at the same time? Most people struggle with becoming successful in one domain.
Oh, I don't know. Nobody told me I couldn't do it. Each one sort of just grew. After I left school, I started as a software engineer. Actually, sort of was an accident. I started at a company that made database software, and it was a friend's father's company. And she was doing the quality assurance reports, you know, just typing them in. And I asked for a job, and she said, well, why don't you just do that job? I'm like, okay. So then I went and applied for it, and they thought I was applying for the quality assurance job, not the quality assurance data entry job. Mm-hmm. So I was like, well, sure, I can do that too. So I accidentally became a sort of junior programmer. And so I did that for a while, then got the job at Origin as a programmer there, and worked my way up, and mostly through not sleeping and working 24 hours a day. And then later, the artwork grew out of the video game industry, because my artwork is interactive artwork. So it's like video games, but as fine art. Mm-hmm. I probably wouldn't have sold those had it not been for a friend who encouraged me to try selling them to museums. And with his help, I made a little video and sent it off to a museum, and they bought it. And so I figured if one will buy it, maybe somebody else will buy it.
Right.
And then in 2003, I was just sort of bored with the art work. I felt like I had just sort of reached a plateau on it. And I was sitting around reading a lot of science books, which is what I usually do anyway. And my girlfriend at the time said, well, why don't you go and, down to the University of Texas and become a grad student? And I was like, well, I don't know. I don't know if I really want to be a grad student. And she said, well, you don't really know what a grad student is. And I was like, well, you're right. I don't really know what a grad student is. Okay, so I'll go down. And I talked to the graduate student advisor, and he was like, well, what's your degree in? And I was like, well, actually, I don't even have a high school diploma. And so he says, well, first get a high school diploma, then get an undergraduate degree, then you can get a graduate degree. And I was just like, that's just not going to happen. That's ridiculous. And I said, I just kind of want to meet some professors who are into what I'm into. And I said, I'm into the intersection between computers and biology. Mm-hmm. And so he said, well, go talk to this guy, Edward Marcotte. And so I went over to Edward's lab, and we hit it off like quickly. And he showed me around his lab, and he was like, "Look at this cool thing, and check out this cool thing." And finally, he was like, "Well, what do you want to do?" And I was like, "I don't know. I just kind of want to learn stuff." And he said, "Well, there's a desk. Meetings are on Tuesdays." So that's how I joined his lab.
All right. Okay, awesome. Well, my question is, why did you drop out from high school in the first place? And most importantly, or more importantly, why did this never hinder you from learning anything you wanted to learn?
Right. Well, it's interesting that you try to tie those two things together. I would argue that high school very actively tried to prevent me from learning.
Mm-hmm.
So I like learning, and I always liked learning things. It's like my favorite activity. And school really goes out of its way, at least for me, to make sure you don't learn anything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the way it does that is by telling you to learn certain things instead of letting you decide what it is you need to learn as you need to.
Right.
So I would differentiate this like project-oriented learning from classroom-oriented learning.
Mm-hmm.
I like classes, I like lectures, but I like them when I want them. That's why I think that, and when I want them is when I'm excited about them because I need them, because I've got a project that I need that information for, right? So for me, motivation derives from projects. It doesn't derive from abstract sitting in class like somebody who doesn't necessarily even know the subject, like telling me, about it. So, up through maybe, I don't know, 6th, 7th grade, things were fine. You're learning to read. You're like, it was boring, but I managed to survive it. But by high school, I just couldn't take it anymore.
Okay.
And the high school I went to was a particularly bad high school. It was as a physical environment, it was just horrible. It was like concrete blocks and frosted windows so you can't see out, and garish colors, and it was basically a prison. It was built like a prison. It felt like a prison, and it was treated like a prison.
Okay.
So I really just couldn't get out early enough. So I got that job when I was, when I was 16, part-time. And then 17, I was sitting in school, still kind of half going to school. And doing something like for work at school, like some thought process I was going through. And then I was like, wait a minute, if I was at work, I'd be getting paid.
Right.
So I just stopped going to school and just went to work every day.
Okay. All right. Thank you for sharing that. I can hear out that you were a big believer in self-directed learning, independent learning. And I feel the same way. However, before I came across your story, I always thought that academia, the academic world, is kind of the last domain or world in which you only can get forward by accomplishing a very tightly regulated, formalized career path. But
Right.
you are kind of the exception, isn't it? So you're not only a high school dropout, you also managed to get published in Nature and other high-impact peer-reviewed publications.
Yeah.
So my question is, how did you do that? How did you accomplish that?
It's very simple. I didn't do it alone.
Right.
Those were collaborations,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm very proud that they were collaborations. I would never have done those things by myself, and vice versa. Like, those collaborators I worked with wouldn't have gone down the avenues they had done had I not been around. So those were really good examples of different people's perspectives coming together to do something unique. So I don't even try to publish without collaborators.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And it's simply because I don't even really believe I want to. Like, it's just way more fun to do it with collaborators.
Right.
It's also much more practical because it solves the problems of connection that you're talking about. You know, during peer review, there's a lot of like judgment that goes on of like, oh, well, that's, you know, Bob's work, and like I know that he's a good professor, or often it's the opposite. Oh, I don't like Bob's work and I'm already prejudiced against it before I've even read the paper. But you know, peer review is a kind of some degree inside business where literally peers who know each other like review each other's work. So there is some difficulty if I attempted to publish you know, by myself on the first try,
right,
then, you know, that might be difficult. Although, not impossible. Like if you have a good idea and you've done something well, like the journals are going to pick up on it, but maybe you're not going to go into Nature on the first try.
Right.
But, that said, of course, once you establish, you know, then you're established. But, again, it's kind of irrelevant to me because I've never wanted to publish without collaborators.
Right.
And so I've never really even had to put any thought into or worry into whether or not it was going to be the case that I would be ignored because I had no track record.
Right, right. Okay, got it. Could you dissect a little bit the process of getting published in collaboration in Nature for our audience?
I mean, it's incredibly simple. Like,
okay.
I was walking down the hall and there was a meeting going on, and I sort of got called into the meeting. Hey, Zach, we're having a meeting. Okay, what's the meeting about? And they said, well, there's this contest at MIT called the Synthetic Biology Jamboree, and we're like supposed to make a project for it. I'm like, oh, that sounds neat. Like, well, what's the topic? And they said, well, we're supposed to make a biological state machine. Well, what's a state machine? And I'm like, okay, wait, I can explain what a state machine is because I'm a computer person. So I explained what a state machine is. And then we're like, so then we all got excited because like I was bringing information to them that they didn't have. And I was like intrigued by the, you know, by the problem. And so just very quickly I said, oh, well, you know, if you want to show off, which is the goal of this project, then what you want to do is you want to come up with some problem which is very, very simple, but when multiplied by a gigantic number is really interesting. Mm-hmm. Because you can only engineer a bacteria to do very, very simple things. But what you get with a bacteria is as many of them as you want. You want a quintillion of them, you can have a quintillion of them. Right. And so as soon as I said that, I was like, oh, that's an image processing or a signal processing problem. And I said, well, like one of the simplest signal processing problems is you know, a band detector or an edge detector. And so then we sat and sketched on the board like how that might work. And we ended up, you know, spending years building it and collaborating and finding collaborators at UCSF. And the people at UCSF had already done most of the work. And so you just kind of put together a project like every project I've ever done. It's a combination of finding stuff that's already built and building things that aren't there and working with people and talking to them and like getting it all to work together. And then we knew as soon as we had the idea that it was probably, if we could get it to work, a high impact journal project. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And but of course you never know whether you're going to be able to get it into a high impact journal. You just submit, and if you don't get into, you go down to the next tier of journal. Right, right. But we were very lucky, and we got into Nature on that piece. But the real point of that story is that you don't plan that kind of thing. It's like you work with smart people, and you know, and you try your best at like finding interesting ways that what you know and what they know can come together to like to form something. So the main lesson is really very simple. It's friendship, like having those friends,
right,
and collaborating, and nobody ever, my friends don't ever ask questions about what I like, whether I went to school or not. They don't, it's just irrelevant to them because they're my friends.
Okay. Well, this leads us to the last and final question I'd like to ask you is, could you share with our audience your process of learning anything? Is there a specific learning blueprint or algorithm you follow?
Not really. I follow my interest, I guess, is the key part of it. Right. So, like I described earlier, I tend to project-oriented learn. I'm like, oh, it'd be neat if I could do X. Okay. So I start trying it, and then, hold on, let me turn that back on. I start trying it, and then I run into some bottleneck, and oh, that's not going to work. And oh, I need to know about this. Okay, go read the Wikipedia article on it. Oh, there's a reference on the Wikipedia to a blog. Go read the blog. Like, oh, that's got a reference to a book. Go read the book. So, you just kind of go through. But the really, really valuable way that I learn stuff is I just go ask my friends. And I have a network of really smart friends.
Right.
And I think I said this in that book. There was a joke that my friend's grandmother told him. She said to him, she said, don't marry for money, just hang out with rich people and marry for love.
Right.
And I always thought that was funny. And sort of the same thing. It's like, well, like, don't bother getting an education, just hang out with smart people. So you get an education for free if you hang out with smart people. So, like, by far the most common way I learn things is I go and I ask somebody, and I take them to lunch, and I like have a lunch with them, and then we talk about like that problem, which always leads to some more interesting thing, or some book I should read, or a web page I should look at, or an experiment I should try.
Right.
And that's, I think, really historically, probably the way that most education was done. If you think about before there was industrialized education, before people like were rounded up into classes and like put 30 in front of a teacher, back when education was the only really done by very rich people, it was one-on-one, and it was a network of tutors, and you learned by like, basically having a lot of like smart tutors. Well, that's a pretty good way to learn if you can afford it. But the truth of the matter is, it doesn't really cost anything. That's the secret, because friends don't really cost you anything. All you need is smart friends. The only thing it costs you is that you've got to be able to give something back. And that means that you've got to be able to work on their projects and help them, or otherwise it's not a friendship, right? So it's really about having smart friends and maintaining them.
Okay, got it. Yeah, awesome. I mean, I guess you have a lot of smart friends, but what if you don't have any friends in a particular area of interest that you really want to become knowledgeable in or knowledgeable about? What do you do?
We live in the age of the internet. I mean, you send an email to them and say, hey, you find somebody who is a professor in that field, and probably not just one, but multiple. And you read up on their web pages about what they're interested in. And then you write an email saying, hey, I read such and such in your web page, and I'm really excited about your work, and I think it's really neat. And I was wondering whether like I could talk to you over Skype, like about, a project I'm working on. That won't work 100% of the time, but it'll work fairly well.
Right.
And like, you'd be surprised, like you can talk to practically anybody if you're genuinely interested in what that person does. Like you could talk to them. And especially professors. Professors like almost nothing more in the world than talking about whatever it is they work on. And they actually live in a world where their students, and they have tons and tons of students, aren't interested in what they work on. Mm-hmm. So they constantly live in the opposite world where like they're just beating their head against like students who don't really care. If you show up out of the blue and show that you genuinely care, that's like, they love that. They, you know, that's what they became a professor for. And they're usually frustrated that they have students who don't show the interest in the field.
Right. Okay, awesome. Zack, thank you so much for for letting us pick your precious brain. If people would like to find more about you and the project you are currently working on, where can they find you?
Oh, they can look me up on the web. I've Zack, Z-A-C-K, Booth Simpson. Just Google me, and you'll find my blog, and you'll find my homepage, and look hard enough, and you'll find my email address.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, we'll put all relevant links into the show notes below the video. And if you guys, our audience, want to learn more inspiring stories from unconventional academics and experts like Zack is one, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and visit us at howtobecomeaprofessor.com.